Hi, I'm Leslie Lowe. Welcome to Leslie's Lowedown on Life.
We're talking today about how life can change on a dime and just in a heartbeat. So today I've got with us Ken Hopkins. You know him from Dave, Ken, and Molly, the trio there, and his beautiful wife, Trish Hopkins. The other side, the better half. Is that the better half?
Finally, my better half. People can see and hear my better half. Finally.
Oh, you guys have been married for what, 39 years?
39.
And counting,
And
yes.
counting. I'm going to start with you, Ken, and say, take us back to July 13th, 2015.
Wow.
How did that day start?
That was a Monday. I remember that day pretty well. It was a really warm day. And I had a regular day at work. And I remember coming home, sitting at my desk, and I was listening to music. And I can still remember the song I won't talk about the song, but I was obsessed with the song. And I'm listening, and I remember texting my nephew in Boise, Idaho, about something, I don't know what. And I was obsessed with riding bike. I usually run or ride bikes, find something to get in shape. And Trish had come home and was making dinner, and I was thinking, I can get my bike ride in, real quick bike ride, and I'll be home. And she said, oh, come on, the dinner's ready. And I said, I'm going to jump on my bike real quick, do my little ride. And I did my entire ride. I can remember it all, except my final little swoop into our neighborhood, oddly enough, was where I apparently hit a curb, and I don't remember much after that.
And all of our kids were at home. Our oldest daughter was finishing her college. Dylan was a sophomore in high school, and our middle son was in college.
Yeah, and graduated.
So, when you make dinner as a mom, you're like, okay, it's ready. Everybody sit at the table. But he was giving me it'll just be a bit. And I remember it was like, okay, this is a longer bike ride than he told me. And, I had done the dishes. I was back in my bedroom. And my daughter knocked and said, there's neighbors at the door. And I could just tell by my daughter's look on her face, that it wasn't good. And that he was right at the entrance of our housing development. And the neighbor came and got me and took me to him. And the whole neighborhood was out. But immediately the paramedic said to me, this isn't good. I just want you to know that it's a bad situation, and he can't, feel anything. And Kendall was talking to me.
I don't remember much of that.
And, from that point, I just knew that I knew he was going to be paralyzed, that he wasn't going to be able to walk again. I mean, when I see him in my mind, it's like I can still see him standing at the door waving to me with the sun behind him at the front door when he left, which I would say maybe that was a little bit of an odd moment, because that is still clear in my mind. Maybe it's the thing that happens before something traumatic happens. I don't know if other people have that.
It is odd how that time. I remember the first thing I remember was apparently I was in the ambulance and Trish was whispering in my ear, and I just felt. I wasn't in pain. I just felt like I was so deep inside some dark little place in my head. It was where I was. Couldn't feel anything. I could tell that I remember raising my hands in the ambulance and saying, in my head, I was saying, I think I'm going to be okay. You know, but Trish just whispered, "You've been in an accident. We're on our way to the hospital." And I could just hear
You
her
hear that.
voice, and that's what I hung on to. But I remember rolling down there or going to the hospital, and I remember inside just thinking, I don't know if I'm gonna walk again. I just had that. It just felt like any can you feel this? Can you feel this? And I knew in my head, man, I want to feel a poke, but I couldn't feel anything. I didn't know what was happening.
And it was just really kind of a freak accident, wasn't it?
Just very
Because
freak.
you had your helmet on, you were doing all the right things, you were almost home.
I was almost home. My surgeon apparently said, I've never seen an accident or damage this bad that wasn't that a motor vehicle wasn't involved with. Huh. Basically, he's never seen just somebody fall off their
wake
bike.
up. Well, you about 2 weeks later, you said to me that when he was at the hospital, he goes, I remember putting my hand up, and he goes, if someone was too close to me, I'd put my hand up, and he did remember that. I don't think anybody hit him, but I think there was
I may
a
have been in a
car that
rush.
came in close
Startled you?
off
Yeah.
that startled
Could
him.
have. It was busy, and that was something that resurfaced. And Trish was referencing when I was on my bike, the hand signals, and when I pull into my own neighborhood, usually I just pulled in. I didn't really feel the need to hand signal if there wasn't traffic, but I do distinctly remember putting my hand up, like officially, like I'm turning in, just so everybody knew. I don't know if that meant anything, but that was just something that kind of resurfaced.
Yeah, one of those things. I
Yeah.
mean, honestly, it could be one of those things where you felt a little startled or maybe rushed or needed to get out of the way.
Probably
Right.
just lost your balance on
And
the bike.
could have, and there's a little median with trees and a little curb, and I hit that curb, and then
A tree.
basically the tree stopped my momentum, and that's where the back of my head hit. And thankfully, I was wearing that helmet,
Yeah.
which I still have the helmet, and just to look at it and say, I can't believe that this saved my life, probably.
So take me from there. Then you're in the hospital, and I'm sure it's all kinds of hurried busyness
It's
around
hurried.
you.
We went right, of course, to the ER, and they had the neurosurgeon came in, and he asked me what he did for a living. And I told him, and he said I don't know, that he gives you that little sliver. It was a little much for Kendall, but he was like, he can go back to work. And I was like, later on, it's like, you can go back to work. That's what the neurosurgeon said. And
Right.
it gave us a goal.
And he did, and all of anything from here on until St. Luke's, basically 23 days at Sacred Heart. I do have glimpses of memories, but I have to rely on Trish. Yeah, the surgeon came in to her immediately and said, what does he do for a living? And she said, he works in radio. Good, he will be able to return to work. And that gave...
But it was pretty chaotic.
That gave her a lot of energy, but just the chaos of things going on, which I wasn't even aware of.
Right, because
He was giving me passwords like, okay, now you need to tell so-and-so this is the password to this. And he was just reeling. So he was he was very conscious and talking and before you went into surgery.
But I wasn't quite aware of what I was repeating. For some reason, I kept giving her the password to my work email. And it was like they're gonna need to. And then I thought, well, I'm sure the IT guy could probably get into my email if anybody needed
But it was
him.
probably your
It was
brain
just
trying to get some order,
And
right?
it was like
And
all
the
the
familiarity.
things.
What's going to happen tomorrow?
And to
Yes.
be honest, there was part of my process was I would many times eat dinner and I would jump back on the laptop, get things, remotely.
Mhm.
And I had not gotten the music set for Tuesday on the radio station yet. And I was at a hospital at 10 o'clock at night. So my mantra, I guess I was, Trish had to call everybody and
Yeah.
tell them what happened. And
you
then
were
it was
still-
chaos.
You were still trying to do what you needed to do.
I think
your brain was trying to normalize
I think
everything.
my brain was just spitting out just random things.
Familiarities.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Just all the stuff.
When he was at Sacred Heart, he had a spinal stroke, which we have never talked about.
What is that?
We
Talk about that if you don't mind.
It affected his arms, so he had full function of his arms. But
And hands.
it's something to do with your nerve damage. So he lost half of the feeling in his arms, and the nerve pain was terrible. It was the neurologist and the neurosurgeon were going back and forth as to what to do, and he was in terrible pain. And they were the neurosurgeon wanted him to get to St. Luke's, and the neurologist was no. We think he had a spinal stroke. He needs to stay in the hospital. Well, the surgeon won, and he went to St. Luke's, but you only get so many days of rehabilitation, and he couldn't. They had to put a sign on his door. He couldn't even stand to hear the click on the door that's shutting. So
Those are fake memories.
And is that sensitivities because of the stroke?
yes,
Wow.
And the bottom line is, I wasn't probably strong enough to be discharged yet, but
so they sent him
I
back
didn't
to Sacred
back
Heart
to Sacred Heart. So
for
that
about
was
I think 2 more weeks
that was
before he
a-
went back to St. Luke's.
quite a bump in the road. I don't remember it being that long.
I know, we were just talking about that. He didn't
It's hard, I'm
remember
sure.
that.
And just for the stroke, I hope I get all the numbers right. My original right chest level was my injury at the T4, thoracic 4, and then up higher. They believe at some point I had a stroke that affected T5 and T6, so it went up 2 more notches.
Wow.
And that caused, I guess, it almost feels like I'm wearing sleeves or gloves or.
Does
it's
it
a
still
little
feel
numb.
like that?
It's numbness. It doesn't hurt unless I can get some nerve pain.
Mm-hmm.
But that just happened while I was laying in bed at Sacred Heart. I do remember 2 professionals. They were arguing about what happened to Ken, and I'm just here going, I don't know.
I'm right here.
Just tell me where
Yeah.
I should go. I don't know. But that was interesting. Trish was probably more involved in that.
It's just probably the trauma on your body.
It could have been, yeah.
Wow.
So
I learned pretty fast how to be his advocate when you have a loved one in the hospital, making sure, sticking up for what you.
I was going to ask you about that because you're already being married for a long time and 3 kids together. You're already naturally each other's advocates, but that takes it up 20 notches, and you're having to step in and speak for him and make sure that he's getting what he needs.
Yeah, that doesn't come to me naturally, but I did learn to do that, to, stick up for him and speak my mind. And when I didn't think care was what should be, or, you're there with your loved one. So I did learn how to do that at Sacred Heart and St. Luke's.
quite strongly, and
Yeah.
and made lifelong friends
St. Luke's is our family.
with some of the
Yeah.
members there, and I just I do remember most of the time at St. Luke's, but prior to that, it's just glimpses of guests, and I remember a therapy dog that came at Sacred Heart, and that was the happiest I had been up to that point. Putting my hand on that warm dog, and it was just laying there.
Comforting.
I'll never forget.
Well, and the
that.
love of the
I will just
community
never
Yeah.
forget that.
too.
Oh,
It was amazing.
not to mention, everything that was happening in the community and on the radio with Dave and Molly spearheading.
I do want to
Uh,
ask you about that because when this happened, it was devastating for you as a family. It was devastating for the community. I'll never forget that. That, oh my gosh, what happened? How can we help? And then just
Mhm.
to see this community rally around you and your family, and it shows how much you're loved and how embedded you've been in this community for years.
Well, and people, you usually hear the negative stories, but
Hmm.
we really learned that there is an overwhelming amount of people that are so generous. I mean,
oh,
he still goes out and people ask him how he's doing, and or he'll somebody's pushed you in the van once, or
uh,
he loved to go to the grocery store before, and so he still will do that for small things, and somebody will reach something on a top shelf for him, or I mean, people are really helpful.
it. I just people are just wonderful, and it's really. I hope I don't crumble here, but when someone comes up and says, like, I prayed for you, or I bought a coffee, and I don't even drink coffee. I mean, it's just so special. It really is. I'm sorry, but
No, it speaks volumes for, again, you are kind of Spokane's family. And when this happened, everybody wanted to jump in and to do everything. And I think in a world where you said it a second ago, there's so much negative and we hear so much bad,
right.
to see the good and to see the love that really is there and it is the foundation is a great reminder. How's that changed you guys?
Oh boy,
Tremendously.
yeah.
I mean, I think I've mentioned through our journey and the people we've met because of my accident, you're kind of in a new club that nobody wants to
Hmm.
be in, a disability club or whatever, but the unbelievable people that have been there before you,
Hmm.
among others, just and just um the friendship and just the support.
My mantra for that was always, okay, it's 1 second, 1 minute, 1 hour, 1 day, and 1 year. And I remember somebody saying, you won't believe how different things will be after a year. And I just thought that's going to be impossible.
We couldn't
But it's
imagine a year.
true. And so I
It's
tried
true.
to just really live by I would just say that in my head. It's like, okay, whatever was happening for the day, I would just really take things
Hmm.
in very small increments because it was impossible to
Yeah.
take
Yeah.
it all.
Yeah.
And so that that was huge.
That's a great mantra, actually. 1 second, 1 minute, 1 hour,
Just
1 day.
very small.
Yes.
It's how things just the priorities just got down to just minute by minute. I remember in St. Luke's by the time I got there and was cognizant and I was in truly rehab form. I was still recovering, but I just looked at my board every morning and that was my day. It was, breakfast, then I go to the gym, then I have a little break, then it's lunch, then I go to the gym, then I got this, and this, and it's like I knew I could do that. I've been on teams. A coach tells you to do something, I just did it.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew I could do that. I knew I could get through the program on time, but
You did say.
nobody knows.
Yeah.
I didn't know how life was going to be after I
Mhm.
get out of here. I had no clue.
It's got to be overwhelming.
You're hoping it all works out,
Mhm.
but
I
all I know
remember.
for now is I can go to the
Yeah.
gym and I can do what they say. I will do that.
When I came in one day at St. Luke's and he was learning how to dress himself. I mean, it's just the basic things. And I was like, it's like, well, you can go back to work, your life isn't over. And he's like, but I trying to learn how to get my pants on here,
It's got to be scary.
Yeah.
It is so, those first few, I mean, it's kind of automatic now, but those first few months, I should say,
Mhm.
I do remember Trish coming in and I was so proud that I got my pants and socks on, because I'm laying and sitting and I was exhausted, but I was just so thrilled. Hey, I got
Yeah.
my pants on. Hey, the doctor said you can go back to work too. All right, I'm not quite sure yet.
You're like, but you've got your pants on.
But hey,
Let's get you to work here.
you can sit up by yourself now.
It is all those things
Mm.
that we take for granted, right? It's just our everyday routines and then relearning.
It is 100%. Even though I was a full-grown man with a full-grown mind, your body you're a toddler. It was almost ironically funny because just a few years prior, we're assisting my elderly father and they become just like your little toddlers and you help them. And it's like, man, I'm learning to walk. I can't hardly even pick anything up. I'm dropping the phone on my face. I was
Okay.
it was a mess. But it's amazing how, and they did say, just wait. You won't believe a year from now. And I'm saying, I can't even think a day from now.
Yeah.
It was frustrating.
How did you guys get
but
through that? Was it humor? Because I know that you guys are, you're funny and
I remember
you're
the
strong.
recreational therapist that first time you went out. And that's like where you have to learn how to transfer into a car. I wasn't even with him. It was like, okay, we're going to meet you at a restaurant.
It was my first field
I can't
trip.
remember if they took you downtown, but I think just with his job and speaking, he had to kind of even talk slower, make sure he's formulating his words. It didn't bother him to be out in front of people, which is difficult for people after they're paralyzed.
Right.
Being in a wheelchair and just feeling awkward, you're different. And I think that helped you quite. I remember the therapist saying that you weren't bothered by being out in a wheelchair. So
That's something I never thought of until Trish told me. Because most people, you're being looked at because you're in a wheelchair, and not that I'm like you on TV, but out and about, people might recognize
Oh,
me. And
yes, they
so
do.
I was always used to people looking at me and just.
Saying hi.
So if they looked at me in a wheelchair, that's great. That didn't bother me. I'm more used to that. And a lot of people out walking with canes or walkers, you don't want to be noticed.
But that's kind of a
because of
blessing that you were able to take that piece of it. and be
Yeah.
okay with it.
And I love nothing more than if someone comes up and asks me a question specifically about my chair or my disability. I'm just really comfortable with that, probably because I was in the public eye and I'm kind of used to that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I do love it when little kids, parents just are mortified when their little kids come up to me because the parents don't know what they're going to ask.
It's true.
I love
Right?
I absolutely love it. Why are you writing in that? Well, I'll tell you what. I was in an accident, and now here's what and they just. I love kids. They're just no question
Yes.
is off the board for them.
They're so sweet and they're so innocent. And they really,
Innocent.
actually, they look at you like a superhero. You're like a
Kind of.
Wheels.
superhero.
Look at
Yes.
those wheels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost more like, where's your cape?
Yeah.
I know. I've had many funny little incidents. I do tend to drop things off my lap quite a bit. I was at a little grocery store and there was a gal with a little toddler in her cart, and I thought the toddler said, "Uh-oh." And I thought, oh, did I drop something? And so I looked down and I told the mom, I said, oh, I thought she said, uh-oh. And she said, no. Anytime she sees wheels, it's go, go. And I go, oh, go, go. Okay.
That's
I
awesome.
Wanted you to go.
I just
I
thought
love
it was
that.
uh-oh.
Not uh-oh, go,
So,
go.
yeah. Oh, kids love wheels.
Yes.
I can see their eyes go right to it.
It's like you've got your own Hot Wheels.
Yeah.
So how did this change how you prioritize life as a couple and as a family?
I do remember laying in St. Luke's, and there were some humorous times. There were a lot of dark times, and I remember telling Trish, I said, I don't know if I can just go on the radio and just laugh about trivial stuff. I couldn't imagine doing that. Like whatever Madonna's doing now. I mean, I just thought, I just don't know if I will get back to that. I did, but there was a time when I just thought, I just can't imagine just laughing about, some sitcom on TV or something. It just didn't, it's felt so far away.
And you had an avenue too to talk about just what it's like living in a wheelchair, which there's not very many opportunities where people that are living in a wheelchair get to hear somebody who's doing that.
Right.
Right.
And so, I mean, really, that's what it came down to, was being able to share that. And you do have a good sense of humor.
I'll tell you, there's a lot of disability is a clown show. There's a lot of, all of our lives are hilarious if you peel it back. But I mean, you just got to deal with the humor of it. And, a lot of that is meeting people that have been there before me. I can't believe we're coming up on 10 years. I was just talking to a friend of mine who is about my age, and I said, I'm almost 10 years in. And he said, well, I'm almost 40 years in. All of my friends, my wheelchair friends, I would say, I still feel like a newbie. I still learn and find a new idea, or why have I been doing it this way for 10 years? I can do, just little shortcuts of about how to live life. It's amazing.
Isn't it interesting how you introduce a whole new community that you didn't even think about probably a lot before, but you say your wheelchair friends.
I know.
But that's so real and that's so honest. But you don't normally think about that. But, you say you're 10 years in, you've got a friend who's 40 years in, but you probably learn so much from each other and gather so much strength, and just having that camaraderie and that relationship with somebody who knows and understands.
Yeah.
It is amazing. Yeah. I look at the class I was with at St. Luke's, which is an odd way to look at it. I was, 54?
Yeah.
It was all 20-somethings. It was all motorcycle, car accident, diving maybe. And
And they had a whole different set of maybe they weren't married or they had just gotten married and they don't have
oh,
any children yet. And what were they gonna? They couldn't go back to what their job was before.
right.
Um,
Uh,
and so we tried to find the positives of things that, wow, he was really lucky he
Yeah.
got to do all these activities. And I mean, spinal cord injuries come so far. I mean, people water ski and snow ski and play basketball
Rec sports and yeah,
and have children and
Which is so great.
yeah.
it's amazing. I
Yes.
did, and I even shared with a couple of the guys. There was one young lady there too, and you'd see them in the gym. There wasn't a lot of camaraderie, but I mean, you were just such on the same level. You could look at each other and communicate almost. But I just felt so thankful that I was married, am married, kids, job, all the things that I got to do before this unfortunate thing happened. I just couldn't imagine being 21 and maybe you're in college and what am I going to do now? But I learned from them. I hope they learned from me, and
How are the kids doing?
I think they're doing great. They're all just making their way in the world on what they want to do.
they
Yeah.
are. I still feel, as Trish said, disability or an injury of this magnitude, it's not just me, it's the whole family. I mean, it just affected them so much. And it's tough for me to look back at that, but from where we all were as a family and where we're at now, I'm so proud of our kids.
Oh, even I was just I was just making it every day. Like I knew what time I needed to be down at the hospital. And, I had 3 kids at home. Our daughter, our youngest son found out he's a type 1 diabetic when he was a freshman in high school.
A year before.
And then he's a sophomore and his dad is paralyzed. And so our oldest and he didn't have a driver's license.
He's kinda
So
going through
she
driver's
had to
ed.
take on Dylan helping get all of his stuff ordered because Kendall did that. And
Get him to
get him
school
to
and-
driver's ed. I mean, she kind of had to take over a parent role because Kendall and I were just surviving every day as to what was going to happen.
I'm just so impressed with you guys as a family. I want to ask you a couple questions and then I'll wrap it up. But what do you say to your coworkers? Because I know that they were like just right there. They were fierce.
Yeah.
That's.
And when I say that, I mean Dave and Molly.
They would just come in and just be there, just not saying anything, just being there. And, it's a business of relationships. They been in a room together every morning for years. And they're so loyal
Yeah.
to each other and supportive and
Family.
family. Yes.
And it was in those early days, actually, the month at Sacred Heart, basically. I do remember the early days, I don't remember, but I can remember Dave just sitting quietly. I remember Molly bringing Slurpees because I just was obsessed with a Slurpee. Tasted
Well,
so
and
good.
everybody just wants to be able to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Do something.
And then about the time I think I was going to St. Luke's, and then I heard about their fundraising, and I mean, I was just so overwhelmed with all of that. They were fierce.
They were
They
fierce.
were fierce.
Even to hear them talk about what you went through now, they're still fierce.
Yes.
They're very fierce
They're
about it.
very
Hmm.
loyal to each other
Yes.
and supportive.
Yeah.
and us to them,
Yes.
Yeah.
you know.
It's-
We
And that could be a
definitely-
whole other podcast, would be like, because I know when I was driving him the first year to work and what was happening at home, because he could, there was several times he passed out in the mornings before I'd get him to work. And there was a whole thing with that. But then it's like, okay, there you go, Dave and Molly, here he is. I mean, they spent
Yeah.
early. I mean, he was back at work 3 months.
Which is amazing.
That those too early, but it was
Hey,
amazing.
And Dave and Molly,
I mean, that's something.
they integrated. They came to St. Luke's, and they practiced how to get me back into my chair should I fall out. I mean, they came up to my house, our house, the first time that I went up, and there was a gang of people in the bedroom watching me transfer onto our bed, and it's like, wow, I better do this right. But
I've never
You
had
better
such
check
an
the landing.
audience. Yeah.
I mean, just the incorporation of people and for them to get comfortable
Right.
with me, and they're totally comfortable now. It's because it
But
is a little.
that had to be pretty nerve-wracking
I'm
when he
sure,
initially went back to work. I mean, it was pretty soon after a spinal cord injury, and yeah.
It was quite soon.
What was that therapeutic for you?
Yes, I look back on it both two ways because we have a gal at St. Luke's who we is a confidant, and many times I've told her I went back to work way too early, but she said that's really what drove you to get out of the hospital, and is absolutely right. Get back to my family, obviously, but just that drive to there's still life out there. I know I can still do this.
So what have been what's been the most difficult transition and what has been the best transition, you would say?
Wow. I don't know. I think a difficult thing for us is there's very few things that we can't do. I mean, we can fly, we can travel, we can do whatever. It just has to be at our own time. And sometimes people have their own, I just can't turn things around that fast. Getting out of bed and getting dressed, I just can't do it as fast as I used to. We just have to do that at our own time frame.
Our own pace.
And
We're going at a slower pace right now.
How do you get through those hard days? Because they happen.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you work through them? Is it the 1 second, 1 minute, 1 hour?
Mm-hmm.
well, I complain a lot. You know, yeah, there's I'll say this. I don't know if my disability really causes the dark days. It's just life in between, and where we are in life. I guess just maybe I would say, oh, now we have to deal with that too, But it's like just life happens, and it's
Just like everybody else.
yeah.
It's hard watching your loved one suffer or going through a hard time, and I want to do battle for it.
And I do. Here's the vanity of me. I try to make my disability footprint as invisible as possible because I don't want people worried about me. I really am fine for what I have and for what I do. So I try to minimize that, but it does affect. It just takes up so much time. It is almost a full-time job. And everybody kind of knows what I've done and what I do. My wife has like 5 jobs and is busy, and it's all at home. She worked at home before anybody knew what that was, and add caretaking onto that. Some days more than others, but it's
pretty-
just adapting, I guess.
Yeah, you just circle back to, the good positive things that you have happening always.
You just take a minute. I always would say, just get through today.
Yes.
Tomorrow will be better.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Get through today.
Exactly.
So I want to end with this. And I do think we have a whole other podcast just on the mental side of things, because that really
Sure.
is just it is just a battle. And I
That's
think
the
for so
grind,
many
yeah.
people in so many different ways. But for somebody who is new to this club, somebody who is just now experiencing this, or even somebody who has been, in this, but they don't have the support system, or they're looking for ways that they can climb out of this, what would you tell them? What would you tell them to give them hope or encourage them?
Well, the first thing is their life is still out there. It just looks so dark at the time. I can put myself right back there, and you'll get through your tough stuff, and people are behind you. And there's a lot of people that don't have near the support we have. Some of the toughest things they have to deal with is life at home. Life at the hospital was great because they had attendees everywhere, but that's tough. But from the physical side, if your body can heal, then there is life out there. It's just going to be different.
And then 1 second, 1 minute, 1 hour, 1 day. I love that.
That
You
is
guys,
the best way.
thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for being the inspiration that you are to me and to so many other people out there. And we will do this again.
Okay.
Yes, we
thank
will do
you
this again.
This
All
is
right.
awesome.
for having us.
Thank you for having us.
I love this. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Go make the rest of your days the best of your days. See you next time.